Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of After Hours. Beautiful day today, sitting outside over here in the oak trees, swatting away all the bugs. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's pride and hubris. It seems like today's society, the messaging and the social media platforms are this breeding ground for pride. I think it's so attractive to especially young people in today's society because there is a lack of courage in today's society. And the way that I observe that today's culture gets around that lack of courage is by instilling this sense of false pride and entitlement into people. And this message is a very alluring message, especially for those who feel like they are powerless or invisible or they lack courage in their life. I know for myself that courage is something that a person can never have too much of. And I mean the right type of courage, moral courage, and a mental fortitude. I don't think there will ever be a point in my life where I think that I have too much courage. So when I think about this idea of pride, I think to one of my favorite fighters. Now, I'm not the biggest MMA fan, but I do watch it from time to time. And my favorite fighter was always Fedor Emelianenko. I don't know if any of you have seen any of his fights before, but it was not only the quality of his fights and his actual performance, but it was his character that was so drawing. So he used to enter the ring with this expressionless, just stone cold face. And he was always very respectful. A lot of times he wouldn't participate in the typical stare down of his opponent when he would be facing his opponents. And he would face just monsters. Some of these guys were just massive. He had this very unique combination of fearlessness, of courage, with complete humility. Now, of course, he's obviously a person, and I'm sure he'd be the first to say that he's not a perfect person, but what he emulated, and he did this for years, I think he had a 10-year streak of no losses. So for 10 years straight, he won every single fight that he participated in. And it was precisely his character, that humility, that was so drawing to people. And you could see even his opponents, who some of them he beat very badly, had this immense respect for Fedor. And it was precisely this combination of humility and courage that he possessed. Now, in today's society, especially in the social media platforms, pride is one of those things that is celebrated. And I think it's celebrated more for women than it is for men because of this idea of leveling the playing field, or this idea that there was historic inequalities. So now pride makes up for this perceived historical oppression to society at large, because each person becomes the master of his or her own life, and they become unteachable. Now, for Christians, it's written that God hates haughty eyes and a proud heart. And really what this is saying is that no matter how great a person is, no matter how good a person is, there has to be this level of humility, this ability to admit your wrongdoings. Pride is also a trait that is far easier to see in other people than it is to see in ourselves. And it's also a trait that can take on a lot of different forms. There's a lot of quotes about pride.
Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. But he gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior, and perverse speech. He went on, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world."
Humility will never go out of fashion. The humble person, the penitent person, is always going to be looked at as the person with greater integrity. Even if the prideful person has more to show and some of his pride is deserved or he has accomplishments, those that exalt themselves won't be exalted.
But those that humble themselves will be exalted in due time.
Typically, when we think of very prideful people, most of us look to figures that are heads of state or historical figures, politicians. They tend to be the ones that most people focus on because they have a lot of press time, camera time, and their pride is easily seen and exposed. But it is always far more difficult to deal with the pride in your own heart than it is to point out the pride in someone else's heart. But we can look at some of these examples of pride and hubris and see how they end. Napoleon Bonaparte comes to mind as one of the historical figures that exemplified this arrogance, pride, and hubris. Before his downfall, he was very ambitious. He actually said the saying, "If you want something done right, do it yourself." I believe people still say that nowadays. And we can see these historical figures as a warning to those of us that live in a perpetual state of pride and hubris. Another example that comes to mind is Conor McGregor before he faced off Khabib. And Conor exemplified this total hubris, this arrogance, this boastfulness, this exalting of himself. Even after he lost, he still continued with this pride. And you can see how ugly of a trait that becomes very quickly. Even I think for his fans, the sportsmanship, that trait of pride becomes so distasteful, especially after a loss. For men, how do we counter self-doubt without going into pride? How do we stay courageous morally and physically? I think the antidote to pride is to remain teachable and to admit our faults to one another. In so much of today's messaging, the problems of today's society, the problems of social media, the problems between the genders, political problems, are all pointed outwards. And when problems exist out there, we think that the solution to the problems is to fix or remove those people. And it's a very naive idea that if we could just get rid of all the bad people and put into place all the good people, then everything should be better. But it's always within every single person that potential to be corrupted lies. Your own heart, your own ambitions, your own envy, your own jealousy is so much harder to control than anything outside of you. There is sufficient work to be done within every single person that we don't have to take account for everyone else. To restrain your own passions, your own desires, your own want for vengeance. Even the joy of watching other people suffer is this twisted vengeance that people take pleasure in. So in today's society, there's this whole idea of the red pill movement. And, there's a lot of things that they get right, but I always kind of laugh because the ultimate red pill, the first red pill, was Jesus. He's kind of this figure that in humility, in truth, he was able to put everyone in their place. And so when we see these figures that, you know, come into prominence and have this massive following, we always have to remember that those are people, and people are fallible. No matter how many good qualities a person have, they don't take the place of the ultimate authority. People, and I don't exclude myself from this category, people are prone to say a lot of stupid and foolish things. And so we can never put a person on a pedestal as this supreme authority. And we do this to our own detriment. So with that, catch you on the next one.